Hi, everybody. This is Christopher J. Finn, Boogie by Night, and this is another live reading of The Stitches on the Stone, um, November 6th, or Chapter 6. Now, we left off with Janice and Benji and their interaction, well, post interaction after the explosion of tweeds. We saw Janice and Madeline kind of waking up on the side of a road. And now we're going to move on to Benji, who, uh, well, you'll see. Okay, November 6th. Benji. Benji jerked upright with a gasp. He ran a hand over his face, chest, and arms, allowing himself to breathe after ensuring all his little bits were in all the right places. Whatever happened to him at Tweeds, the events, fires, the crazy lady with a deadly touch, Benji miraculously pulled through it unscathed. He woke in his mother's room, blinds drawn, with a single soft lamp glowing in the center next to her aging dresser. A full glass of water sat on the end table to his right, while two empty glasses rested on the table to his left. One glass displayed signs of condensation, signifying at least one person had recently been in the room with him. Just not now, which was beyond good because Benji needed a minute to process the events leading up to waking in his mother's room. He should be resting in a hospital room. He imagined tubes and wires protruding from all his orifices. Benji believed his skin to be a scarred, melting mess of bone and meat. He imagined countless doctors discussing his condition, how he'd never be the same, and he's lucky to be alive at all. Benji looked at the palm of his hands and tried to recall the evening at Tweed's. He vaguely remembered an argument with old lady Janice. Benji still didn't know what the woman was going on about, though he remembered Janice demanding the stone he tossed out a few days prior. She insisted he threw it at her, but hell, all he did was toss the damn thing over his shoulder. Besides, even a major leaguer would only a major leaguer would have enough steam to pitch the rock past Davis, let alone Dilthey Street. There was no goddamn way. Even if he had thrown the thing, Benji wasn't going to beam an old lady with a rock. He's just not that type of person. Sure, he committed his share of mischief, poop in the bag, maybe a ring and run, and he could lay claim to at least half of the broken windows down at the crypts. Hurling a rock at a person? Nah, his conscience wouldn't allow it. Still, the old goat insisted. There were moments he remembered, Janice reaching for him, the rush of air as he moved to the kitchen. The heat, oh God, the heat. It was like sitting in a fireball while it burned everything around him. The hair in his arms and the hair in his arms flared and fizzled. His vision fogged, and during one horrifying moment, he swore the fluid in his eyeballs boiled. This thought alone brought on a deep shudder, and he pushed it to the back of his mind. Then Benji blasted through the door, shoulder first, forcing his right arm to bend around his neck. He saw his fingers, all fucking 10 of his fingers on the left side of his body. Benji remembered a snap, a sharp, rolling pain, and then nothing. No pain, even though his feet struck and bounced off the cement road, hitting him across the temple before settling into a position perpendicular to his chest. He folded like a pretzel. Fire, impacts. By all rights, Benji should be lying on a slab in a morgue. He believed wholeheartedly that he had only been inches from death, and yet here he is, whole and undamaged. There was truth behind the imagery until there wasn't. Because, and Benji flexed his fingers and toes to confirm this, his body expressed an entirely new and simple reality. His limbs functioned as they should. He could feel those hands, fingers, and toes. And really, all he could claim was a throbbing headache and nothing more. So he dreamed it, right? The door burst open and Mary rushed to his bedside. She pulled Benji into a tight embrace, and time seemed to freeze. He braced for a potential bout of pain, burnt flesh pressed against cooked muscle, torn apart by a friend's worrying embrace. A moment passed, and Benji relaxed and allowed himself to sink into Mary's arms. Benji breathed her in, and he lost himself to the pure fragrance of her clothing, the smell of hair gel, and a faint hint of smoke. A reality he recognized. Mary's shoulder lifted and fell as she sniffled. I'm okay, he said. Benji pulled her to him and pressed her head against his shoulder. He sniffled too, and both erupted into a mixed fit of relief and sorrow. He couldn't imagine what she must have gone through. She released him, smiled, and dried her eyes. He's... She took a moment to compose herself. He's awake, everyone, she said at length, and moved to the chair beside the bed. Samantha was the first to storm into the room, followed by Lucas, then, oddly enough, Stephen, the waiter from the restaurant. Oh my God, Benji, his mother declared, her eyes wet with concern. She stood at the foot of the bed, hands covering her lips, body shaking as she tried and failed to control her emotions. Lucas took a seat beside Benji. Stephen moved to the dresser and smiled. I'm okay, Mom, I think. What the hell happened? You don't remember? Lucas asked. Benji shook his head. Yesterday's a blur. I remember bits and pieces, but that's all. Yesterday? Stephen dropped his gaze and raised both brows. Kid, you've been out for over a day. Benji looked to his mother, who nodded her agreement. She sat on the bed and wrapped her arms around her son. I was so worried, she whispered. A wave of guilt washed over Benji, and he found he needed to apologize, even if he didn't know why. He couldn't see his mother worry. Not over him, not when he was supposed to be looking after her. I'm so sorry, Benji said, hoping he sounded more robust than he felt. Dude, Mary told us what happened. That was fucked up, Lucas stated. Mary nodded, and Samantha cuffed him across the back of the head. I'm sorry. Well, tell me what happened. All I remember is old lady Janice reaching for me, and boom, one big blank. Did she hit me or something? Or something, Stephen replied. So you don't remember the gas fire at all? Little sparky spark, shoot the kid out the front door thing? Stephen asked. Mary's eyes widened, and she bit her bottom lip. A look Benji knew all too well. It said to play along, and she'd explain later, so he did. When Mary told me what happened, I ran to Tweed's. I didn't know what to think. The door, Samantha sobbed. The windows. How anyone made it out alive is a miracle. Yeah, Benji agreed. He furrowed his brow, poised to raise 1,000 questions, then settled back when Mary shook her head. It's over, right? I feel okay. Maybe a bit hungry? Samantha smiled, cried, and kissed Benji on the forehead. She cupped his chin, then wrapped her hands around his head and pulled him close, happily trembling beneath a wary smile. She stroked his hair and then asked, Eggs? Eggs would be great. Okay, sweetie, his mother replied, kissed him once more, then rose and left the room. Lucas, Mary, and Stephen immediately descended on him, each kneeling and cautiously signaling the other to control their voices as they spoke in a panic. Dude, there is some fucked up shit going on in this town. Interlude. Washington Rochison pressed his button nose against the stained glass door at the front of his home. He glanced behind him, then turned his attention to a small gray object sitting in the center of his walk leading from his front door. He pressed his little fingers against the glass and then called for his mother. Mom! He tapped the window and then slid a finger across the glass, leaving a small, oily trail. He spoke softly, knowing if he raised his voice, Mommy would push him up the stairs and into his room. He couldn't allow that, not until he found out what that little gray thing was. Mommy, he repeated. He stepped away from the door, then glanced down the hall to the kitchen. He pointed outside, and she nodded, and he returned to the front door. His mother appeared carrying his jacket, which Washington quickly zipped up, then stepped out. Stay in the yard, sweetie, his mother said, folding her arms. He assured her he would, then painstakingly pushed the heavy door open. He hopped off the first brick step onto the second, saying, Jump! Before landing on the sidewalk. Washington licked his lips after the first bite of the morning's frigid air stole his breath, forcing him to stand still and allow his body to adjust, marveling at the steam rolling off his lips like dragon's breath. He growled, giggled, then skipped to the end of his walkway leading to the sidewalk at the intersection of Dowry Lane and Back Front Road. "Two houses," he shouted, then pointed to his left. He hopped in a semicircle and flapped his arms. His mother clapped from the doorway, then returned to her cooking. Washington approached what he soon discovered to be a large stone. Rocks around here were a treasure unto themselves, and many neighboring homes were decorated with boulders too massive for Washington to lift, or tiny wood chips wrapped around big bushes too dull to entice play. Either way, he was told no when asked if he could play with or on them. Seeing this gem on his property felt like he struck solid gold. A thought occurred to him, and he scanned down the sidewalk, first left, then right. The stone wasn't his yet, so he had to be sure its owner wasn't nearby. It's what good little boys do, his mother would say, and Washington tried really, really hard to be a good little boy. Seeing his street empty, Washington knelt and proudly inspected the prize. He pointed to the stone, looked to the kitchen window, and happily announced "Rock" to his mother. He waited for a response from his mother, returning his attention to the stone when she didn't appear in the doorway. He gasped when seeing the painted eyes, red on the left, blue on the right, and a happy face stretching from one end of the river rock to the other. "Wow," he whispered, then dropped to his heels. He knew once this prize was going inside a shoebox under his crib. He touched the left eye, said "Red," and looked to the window for praise. "Blue," he sang, delighted at the splotch decorating its left eye. He moved his finger along the stitched smile and counted, reminding himself to count aloud, 'cause Mommy loved to hear his voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, he shouted, then turned to the kitchen window. Washington needed Mommy to see how good he was at his numbers, so Washington touched the little stitches crossing the smiley face until he reached 20. Then Washington reset his count. He had a hard time past 20, scoring the remaining 4 with a lower tone. "I counted to 20 and then 4, Mommy." He waited for a response. When his mother didn't appear in the doorway, Washington turned his attention back to the stone. 24, he repeated, pleased that the stone maintained its pleasant smile. He picked up the rock, stood, and tossed it into the air. Mommy hated when he threw things, especially inside the house, and always scolded him for it. He could hold out for three of those before his mother would force him inside and into his room unless she was in a bad mood. Then she might make him stand in the quiet corner, a small nook next to the television in their living room. Nothing. Not even a "Washington, what have I told you about throwing rocks?" sounded from the front porch. Washington frowned, then dropped the rock. His next option, ringing the front doorbell — Washington always loved hearing the chime — would certainly draw his mother's attention. A resounding and audible crack quickly pushed his thoughts of praise aside. He knelt, picked up the stone, and inspected the small crater at the impact site. He counted the cracks around the crater. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He blinked, then inspected all sides of the rock. Nothing looked out of the ordinary. He tossed the rock high into the air, momentarily panicked as instinct told him to move out of the way, and drunkenly hobbled a few paces towards his front door. This time the sound was louder, like the crunching he heard in his head when eating cereal. The sound bellowed off the neighboring homes before reverberating down the street. "Echo!" he shouted, standing motionless, then frowned when nothing responded. He bounced and hurried over to the fresh divot beneath the stone. Washington lifted the rock skyward and giggled as the white stitched smile returned to him. Okay. Hey, that was a rough one. "Go higher?" Washington asked. He lowered his hands, bent at the knees, then jumped, releasing the stone at his apex. Washington watched as the stone lifted high into the air, much higher than he would have believed he could throw, and then fell to the center of the road in front of his house. The blow was considerate, creating a shock wave that sent Washington sprawling. The quake shook the surrounding homes, lifting cars inches off their tires and shedding the neighborhood trees of any remaining leaves. Washington stood, jumped, then shouted, "Boom!" He turned towards his home, and sure enough, his mother peered through the window, eyes wide with shock. Washington pointed, bent at the hips, and growled. He turned to retrieve the stone, then fell on his rump. 6 women stood at the edge of the giant crater at the center of the road. Their heads hung limp below the lines of their shoulders. The group swayed left, then right. They turned in unison and sang, "The path is set, the path is set, return to the path, the path is set." Washington raced inside, slammed the door, then stepped to the dining room window. He whimpered and ran to his room when he didn't see where the 6 women had disappeared to, fearing they may be lurking around any and every corner. Washington closed his bedroom door and slipped under his crib, repeatedly calling for his mother. Finally, he closed his eyes and cried. Edward. "You hit like a truck," Cheryl stated with a groan. She sat on the floor of his makeshift cell. Her left eye was closed tight amid an oversized patch of darkening, puffy skin. Dried blood covered her nose, lips, and chin, and left a dark streak down the length of her overcoat. She smiled through the bars of her cell, and Edward looked away. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to hit you," she sighed. "Oh, don't worry about it, Eddie. To be honest, I didn't feel it. Not sure what that says about you, I guess. It's pretty fucked up, I mean. Normally I'd have called the police or shot you myself." Cheryl motioned to herself sadly, then back to Eddie. He watched her for a long, excruciating moment. Seeing her so forgiving only heightened the guilt already flowing through his mental sluice gate. Honestly, this woman needed a hospital badly. He wanted to open the cell and rush her to the nearest emergency room, but he couldn't, or wouldn't, maybe both. She could be hemorrhaging, and he'd never know it. He didn't need her death in his hands, and he had no idea how to dispose of a body should she keel over in front of him. But in that same sadistic thought, Edward was sure his internal rageometer would probably show him the way, maybe lead him to just the right spot outside of town. The suggestion sparked hope, and hope ignited the fire. He pushed the thought from his mind. "Do you want me to let you go?" he found himself asking. He held his breath when his stomach threatened to drop him to the floor. Cheryl slid to the wall, pressed her back against the metal bars. She inspected the tiny cell, then shook her head. "Nah, I'm good. I'll take a pillow if you have one." She jabbed her elbow against the bars and chuckled when the entire structure shook. "Besides, it wouldn't take much to break out of this place if I changed my mind." Ed replied with an amused smile. "I suppose not." He excused himself and went to retrieve the pillow. "What am I supposed to do now?" he questioned silently, and his mind at once focused on the center of his gut. He waited for the uncomfortable shift in his intestines when his mystery marionettist set him on a task. He felt nothing. "I guess I get the lady a pillow." He returned, half expecting Cheryl to have slipped out, using Ed's goodwill as a distraction, or hit him over the head. hit him over the head. Oh, wait, let me get to my part. Sorry, I coughed. Apologies, my readers, my listeners. I guess listeners, right? My listeners, okay. Or hit him over the head with the hammer he had left sitting on the last rung of the stairs. She hadn't moved, smiling warmly, when Edward offered the token of creature comfort. Ed pressed his back against the wall and slid down, eliciting another warning tremble from the entire structure. "Thanks, Ed." She propped the pillow against the wall, then gently pressed her back against it. Dust fell from the ceiling as the bracing 2x4s creaked. This seemed so solid when I was building it, he mused. I'd keep the day job. Both chuckled. Ed turned to face her. Cheryl, how well do you know me? Hardly at all, which is why this, Cheryl motioned to the surrounding walls, is so fucking odd. You mean building a makeshift jail in my basement? I keep saying gel, like I don't know why. No, dumbass. I mean this, you and me. You know, before you beat me into the ground. Why didn't you just kill me? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think I can. Like it's not part of who I am or where I'm supposed to be going. He sighed. Look, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what to say. Enough, Eddie, Cheryl interrupted. I am capable of defending myself. Don't you worry about that. Then why didn't you? She sighed. I suppose that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? I don't think I could have for some weird reason. Something in the air, maybe? Edward pressed his eyes closed, inhaled, and pushed back his building tears. What the hell was wrong with him? When did rage become the dominant factor in his life? It was rage, wasn't it? Was he a monster? All right, let me take one quick second because my throat, I'm about to cough again. Oh, that is a live drinking of Gatorade. I'll take any sponsorship you guys want to offer. Just drop me a line. Christopher J. Finn at finfiction.com. Okay. Oh. I suppose that's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? I don't think I could have for some weird reason. Something in the air, maybe. Edward pressed his eyes closed, inhaled, and pushed back his building tears. What the hell was wrong with him? When did rage become the dominant factor in his life? It was rage, wasn't it? Was he a monster? So, thinking back, this was what? His mind telling him she didn't fit the bill? Cheryl's hand gripped his shoulder, and Edward slipped his hand into hers. It's not what you're thinking, Cheryl soothed. How would you know what I'm thinking? I just do. Something about you says we've been here before. I can't imagine why, 'cause I'd remember that shit. Before? Jesus, Edward whispered. I don't want to be this person. Doesn't matter what you want, does it, Eddie? Doesn't matter what I want. Besides, I need you to be this person. Edward turned with his brows raised. He sat cross-legged to face her, and she continued. I don't know. I wanted you, then I wanted to kill you, and then I wanted to strip you naked and take you on the concrete, she said, and her expression momentarily shifted to one of pure hatred. Then I wanted to kill you again. She swallowed and sighed, shaking her head. But there, just for a moment, there was something. You felt it too, didn't you? I didn't want anything else in the world. Cheryl nodded and smiled wide. Right. And me, married to a doctor. And believe me when I say I love the guy, I mean really, really love him. Balls to bone. He's been my world for... She considered this, then shrugged. Forever, I suppose. We served together, stationed together, and eventually lived together. Cheryl sighed, then smiled. I tolerate anything. His time away can be a day, a week, or even a month or two. I never worried about infidelity because I trusted him. I know he'll come home, and I knew I'd be there when he does. Well, maybe not this time, Cheryl chuckled. Yeah, definitely not this time. And by the way, you might want to clean up the blood at the end of the driveway. He's no fool, after all. He'll call the police. Ed chuckled. Police. When was the last time you saw a cop around here? Cheryl considered this. She moved to speak, paused, then furrowed her brow. You know, it has been a while. Come to think on it, I don't remember seeing a cop at the Halloween festival either. It has to have been a week, a month? Shit, maybe longer than that. Just one more tick on the chalkboard of this fucked up town, Ed noted. You think that's what it is? Something wrong with the town? Cheryl scooted closer to the bars. I don't know, Edward said. He moved a hand over his chest. Something is eating me up on the inside. I hope this isn't the real me. Whatever the answer is, it's out there, and I hope it lets me find it. That is chapter 6 of The Stitches on the Stone. Some of these chapters are going to be a little shorter than others, others longer. As the book progresses, which there are absolute reasons why, but as the book progresses, there are going to be some very short chapters, so I'll probably double up on them. But until now, this is Christopher J. Finn, Boogie by Night, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya later.